It was just before sunrise on September 23rd, 2009, in Stockholm, Sweden. The city was still in deep slumber, calm, quiet, and unaware of the storm about to hit. But not everyone was asleep. Swedish police were racing toward the Väsberga district, responding to a mysterious incident. A helicopter had reportedly landed on the rooftop of the largest cash depot in the entire city. At the same time, over in Mittenge, the Swedish police helicopter unit received an urgent call. They were instructed to scramble immediately and provide aerial support. The pilots wasted no time. They grabbed their gear, jumped into a vehicle, and sped toward the hangar just a few hundred yards away. As they approached the gate, one of the pilots, Anders Johannes, jumped out to unlock it. That's when he spotted something unusual sitting near the hangar doors. It looked like a box with a red, blinking light on top. Suspicious and cautious, the pilots moved in slowly to get a better look. What they found sent a chill down their spines. The box was made to look like a bomb. It even had the word bomb plainly written across it. But strangely enough, it didn't explode. It wasn't real. It was a decoy. Yet despite being fake, this bomb would prove more disruptive than any real explosion Sweden had ever seen. Meanwhile, back in the heart of Stockholm, that very same morning, the high-security G4S cash repository was operating as usual. It was a Friday, and that meant a huge demand for cash was expected for the weekend. ATM machines, banks, and offices would all need to be stocked. Because of that, the facility was at full capacity, with close to $150 million stored in physical cash. Several armored trucks were already lined up in the underground vault garage, ready to receive the money and distribute it across the city. That night, the facility was under the supervision of a man named Oskar Lindgren. He was joined by 22 staff members. Some of them were stationed in the office areas, while a few others, including Lindgren, were working inside the ultra-secure cash counting room on the 6th floor. The machines buzzed and hummed as they counted stacks of money, filling the quiet Swedish night with their mechanical rhythm. But around 5 a.m., the usual hum of the machines suddenly seemed to intensify. It was louder than normal. Staff assumed it might be the sound of a delivery truck starting up. But then, something strange happened. The windows began to rattle, and with every passing second, the vibrations grew stronger. Lindgren quickly told his team to shut down the machines. Something wasn't right. As confusion set in, everyone began searching for the source of the strange noise and tremors. Moments later, Lindgren stepped out of the cash room and made his way to the skylight gallery. And what he saw stopped him in his tracks. Peering through the skylight, Oskar Lindgren stood frozen in disbelief. Just above the G4S building hovered a red and white helicopter, its rotors slicing through the early morning air. It was flying so low that the windows were shaking from force. The sight was baffling. This building didn't have a helipad, and there was absolutely no reason for a chopper to be hovering directly overhead, unless, of course, it wasn't there by accident. Lindgren's gut told him something was very wrong, and he was right. The helicopter was not just passing by. It had a mission. On board were masked intruders who were about to pull off one of the boldest heists in Swedish history. Weeks earlier, in a secluded dock on Skeppsholmen Island, 3 men met in secret. Goran Bajic, the mastermind behind the operation, laid out his plan. He told the others he knew of a place loaded with cash, but there was only one way to get in, and that was from the sky. The other 2 listened carefully. They asked him how such a thing could be pulled off. Bajic, calm and confident, simply said, "I'll get the helicopter. You guys handle the rest." After hashing out the basics, the 3 men parted ways. But Bajic was already several steps ahead. He reached out to a man named Milan Sayo, a former figure connected to the Serbian Mafia, now based in Belgrade. Bajic flew out personally to meet him and request help with the logistics of what was to come. Over the next several days, Bajic traveled to different countries before returning to Stockholm. Once back home, he contacted one of the men from the island meeting, Charo, a former petty thief who was now trying to live a quieter life as a schoolteacher in southern Stockholm. Bajic gave Charo a simple but critical task: buy 5 prepaid phones. These would be used to set up a secure line of communication among the crew. Charo followed through, handed the phones to Bajic, and they were soon distributed to key members of the team, each tied to a specific role in the mission. One of those phones went to a man named Nima Alec. Bajic had a very specific assignment for him: scout out the Swedish police helicopter base in Mittenj. He wanted to know everything: when the last flight usually landed, what time the pilots shut down operations, and when they retreated to their barracks. Nima gathered the intel quietly and sent back his findings. Everything was falling into place. By the time September 23rd rolled around, every piece of the puzzle was in position. At around 2:30 a.m., Nima Alec took up a spot in the woods near the police heliport in Mittenj. He stayed out of sight, crouched in the dark, watching and waiting for the final police chopper to land. A few minutes later, he saw what he was looking for. The helicopter touched down. The pilots powered it down, locked up the hangar, and drove off toward their sleeping quarters. The moment the coast was clear, Alex sprang into action. He sprinted across the quiet road and placed 2 makeshift bombs at the hangar doors. Then he slipped back into the woods and made the call to Bajic. The bombs were planted, and everything was ready. While this was unfolding, about 100 miles north of Stockholm, masked men broke into a private hangar in Norrtälje. Inside was a Bell 206 Jet Ranger helicopter, exactly what they needed. They dragged it out onto the tarmac, fired it up, and lifted off at 4:43 a.m. That same moment, Swedish radar picked up something unusual: a low-flying aircraft heading toward the capital. But no one knew just how significant that small blip on the screen would become. As the chopper glided low and steady toward the Vassberga district, a few early risers on the ground noticed it slicing through the sky. Something about it felt out of place. But by the time anyone could react, it was too late. Back at the G4S building, Lindgren and his team were still trying to figure out the source of the noise shaking their walls. The moment Lindgren reached the skylight, the mystery was revealed. The same red and white chopper now hovered directly above them, illuminating the rooftop with its searchlight. At precisely 5:15 a.m., the pilot brought the helicopter down between the skylight and the roof's edge with surgical precision. 3 men jumped out. One of them swung a heavy sledgehammer and began smashing the glass with brute force. The other 2 untied 2 20-foot ladders that had been strapped to the side of the helicopter. The skylight gave in after a few hard hits. Once the glass was broken, they lowered the ladders into the building and climbed down into the central atrium. Inside, Lindgren rushed back to the cash room, hit the panic alarm, and called security headquarters. The Swedish police received the distress call immediately and began mobilizing patrol units toward the scene. But the thieves were moving fast. They blasted through bulletproof glass, made their way through a nearby office, and in a matter of moments were standing at the steel door of the cash room. With the alarm triggered and police already en route, time was ticking, but the intruders knew exactly what they were doing. After reaching the steel door to the cash room, the thieves used specialized tools to break through. As they forced their way in, the employees, startled and afraid, quickly evacuated, seeking refuge in a safer part of the building. The crew wasted no time. They took out a buzz saw and sliced through the state-of-the-art padlocks, securing cash. Then they started loading money into large bags, taking as much as they could carry. Meanwhile, back in Mittenj, the Swedish police helicopter unit had finally been ordered to lift off. The pilots raced back to the hangar, but were met with a shocking sight. That same suspicious box from earlier, still sitting at the entrance, was now clearly flashing and humming. One of the pilots took a closer look and realized it might actually be an explosive. Unwilling to risk a detonation, the pilots backed off and called in the bomb squad. That fake bomb, simple as it was, effectively grounded any potential air pursuit. Back in Stockholm, ground patrols were rushing toward G4S, but they too ran into trouble. The roads leading to the facility had been sabotaged. Members of the heist crew had earlier scattered caltrops and spiked chains along the route. The traps blew out tires and created gridlock, delaying police backup just long enough to make a clean getaway possible. Inside the cash facility, the job was almost done. With bags full of money, the 3 intruders climbed back up the ladders and returned to the helicopter. Once on board, the pilot lifted off smoothly, soaring into the soft glow of early morning. From the ground, police officers could only look up in frustration as the helicopter disappeared into the sky, unchallenged and unchassed. The aircraft didn't head straight to one place. Instead, it made multiple stops. Crew members were dropped off at different locations to throw off investigators. Eventually, the chopper landed in a wooded area north of Stockholm, in a region called Täby. The pilot then simply walked away, abandoning the aircraft among the trees. When the bomb squad finally examined the explosive devices at the Midden's hangar, they discovered the truth: just a couple of cheap toolboxes with LED lights, powered by a 9-volt battery. But the psychological effect was massive. Stockholm, a city known for its safety and order, had just been shaken by one of the most daring robberies in its history. And to make things worse, the capital was now facing a sudden shortage of physical cash. And the police? They had nothing but questions and a helicopter full of ghosts. Now that the robbers had vanished, the real chase was on. Sweden's National Criminal Investigation Department, known as RKP, took over the case. And here's the twist. They already had some idea that something big was coming. Months earlier, RKP had received intel hinting at a major robbery in Stockholm, but somehow the warning signs had been missed or underestimated. The prime suspect? Goran Bajic. He wasn't some low-level criminal. They'd had their eye on him for a while. The Serbian ministry had even sent diplomatic alerts to Sweden after Bajic started making contact with Milan Sayo, a known figure in organized crime. To stay ahead of him, Swedish investigators had been wiretapping Bajic's phone and bugging his car, hoping to catch wind of a major plan. But Bajic was careful. There was no hard proof, just whispers and patterns. Still, with the heist now executed, RKP had a starting point. They went back to the Serbian intel and discovered key conversations between Bajic and Sayo. These chats mentioned a big job and even referred to a helicopter. That was enough to narrow the focus. RKP assigned lead investigator Jonas Hill to the case. He was an expert in a specialized profiling method called geographic profiling, a technique used to study crime scene locations and estimate where the criminals might live or operate from. But there was another powerful tool in his arsenal: phone data. During the early hours of the robbery, most of Stockholm was asleep. That meant very few phones were in use. Only about 18,000 were active. Compare that to the millions of devices typically buzzing during the day, and it became a goldmine of clarity. Hill's team looked for a particular pattern: a closed-loop network. This means a group of phones that were only communicated with each other and no one else, almost like their own private system. It's a rare signal that stands out among the noise. Fortunately, that's exactly what they found. 5 of the phones, which were purchased by Charo as requested by Bajic, were actively talking to each other, and 8 more phones during the exact hours of the heist. And then, like clockwork, they all went completely silent once the job was done. That silence spoke volumes. It was the first real breakthrough in the case. Armed with the phone data, Jonas Hill's team began mapping out every detail. They built time-stamp profiles for each phone in the network, lining them up with known events from the night of the heist. It was like watching the crime unfold in digital form. At 2:55 a.m., one phone pinged from the Midden's police heliport. This was Nima Alec reporting that the last police chopper had landed. At 3:13 a.m., another phone was active in Ertalj, where the stolen helicopter took off. Between 3 o'clock and 4 a.m., more phones sent signals from the Vassberger area, exactly where the ground crew was setting up road traps. Then at 4:38 a.m., the airborne phone made contact again. Shortly after, another ping came in from a remote beach location, cleared for a drop-off. By 5:13 a.m., multiple phones were active in proximity, confirming the helicopter was mid-operation. And by 5:50, after the job was done, all the phones went silent. It was a crystal-clear digital footprint of the entire operation. Now, the next step was to match those phones to real people. Phone 2 had been active in Ertalj, the exact spot where the helicopter was stolen. Investigators pulled the registry of personal helicopter owners in that area. One name stood out: Alexander Eriksson. His chopper was registered to an address in Uppsala, not far from Ertalj. Still, That alone wasn't enough to link him, until a sharp-eyed officer made a crucial connection. She recalled that months before the heist, an undercover unit had tailed Bajic to a meeting on Skeppsholmen Island. The car he used that day registered to the same address as Eriksson's helicopter. That was no coincidence. The evidence was strong enough to move in. Police arrested Goran Bajic at his apartment, where they found large amounts of hidden cash. The next day, Eriksson was caught at the airport, trying to flee to the Canary Islands. One by one, the rest of the crew started to fall. Charo was arrested for purchasing the phones. Then, in the summer of 2010, a breakthrough came through DNA. A man named Safochatham had cut his hand on the skylight ladder during the heist. His DNA led police to the Dominican Republic, where U.S. authorities helped track him down. More than 10 people were eventually arrested and charged in connection with the heist. Oddly enough, Nima Alec, whose DNA was found on gloves buried near the police heliport, managed to avoid conviction. His defense? Someone had borrowed his gloves and lighter, and he never got them back. As for the money, out of $5 million taken, only a small portion was ever recovered. The rest? Still missing. Still a mystery. A daring heist pulled off with military precision. Fake bombs, blocked roads, and a stolen helicopter. It was a cinematic robbery that rocked Sweden and kept the world watching.